At the time of this interview here, we are about to approach the third week in terms of when the earthquake occurred. And as you noted, the overwhelming amount of urban search and rescue teams that arrived in the first week, the amount of organizations, you had mentioned perhaps over 500 that were registered and countless many others that have arrived. How do we make sure that as the systems unfold, that we stand up the operations for immediate relief efforts, that we're able to stay focused on the mid to long-term recovery needs of Haiti? Because Haiti's been in this situation before. This earthquake comes on the heels of 4 hurricanes last year, where the entire country is still reeling, the infrastructure is devastated. How do we make sure that those organizations that have arrived not only make sure that the people of Haiti survive this earthquake, but that they have the ability to thrive, to look towards their future?
I think one of the key things that we need to do is we need to think about the local capacity of the people there. We need to whatever we do needs to involve the local people. We very often have this magic bullets that we want to throw at a problem like a disaster. So a government may decide to send a water purification plant or a field hospital or one solution or another that is easy for them to put in there as a short-term way of saying, oh, we're helping out. Mm-hmm. But what they very often forget is this long-term. And if you're going to do anything long-term, you have to be willing to invest in the long-term, first of all, not just while it's still in the media. We're seeing now in week 3 that, the media attention is going away quite, step by step. So how many of those organizations are going to be there, 2-3 weeks from now when the media is no longer interested? Mm-hmm. So you have to have this long-term view of things that, yes, I'm not just there to save lives the first few days, but I want to be there to work, help rebuild. And if you're going to do that, you have to do that through the community. Mm-hmm. You cannot come in there, build a hospital, and say, oh, we built a hospital. But what we found, for example, in one of the towns that we visited, was that they had a hospital, but because nobody had funded it, they'd funded the building of it, but nobody had funded the continuation of running it. Mm-hmm. That hospital hadn't been used in 2 years. So, you may have seen, a donor come in there and give money to build that, but they didn't think about the long term. Right. So the same thing you need to do here. Anything you do needs to think in the long term. How do you ensure that you're going to keep on funding or build the local capacity to fund those projects going forward? Mm-hmm.
With regard to donors, it is an unfortunate fact that in the aftermath of disasters, pledging conferences that are stood up, that when, as you pointed out, the cameras have left, that the promises are not fulfilled. Mm-hmm. We've seen this in Liberia, we've seen this in the Bama earthquake and other catastrophic events. What can we do? I mean, we hear now that there are reports and focus on language that says we need to focus on long-term recovery. We're hearing the right things. But somebody with your experience as somebody who just came out of Haiti, how do we hold our politicians? How do we hold people's interests so that this time we get it right?
I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that it's not just about what the public media says, what CNN is doing, what ABC is saying about now, or what's in the Wall Street Journal. We now have the ability to get people to actually report on things. This whole idea of citizen journalism and to keep people interested in things at a much longer term is coming through all the social media revolution that we're going through right now. So I think there is an opportunity for us there to push politicians and others to not just forget things like we've forgotten Darfur or other crises in the past, but to actually make sure it stays current in that social media, even though CNN and others may have stopped covering it. So I think there's an opportunity there. Will we make use of it? That's the big question.
Looking at the future here, and your role in it with regard to whether it's the UNDAC teams or the Icelandic USAR teams that are deployed, what impact do you want to have?
I think what I'm looking at from my personal point of view is that I really want us to start learn from what we do. I keep going to yet another disaster and I see that we're still doing the same mistakes. We're still reinventing the wheel every time, especially when it comes to areas like information management. How do we capture the information about what's going on and how do we share that out to as wide an audience as possible? Unfortunately, every disaster I come to, we're reinventing what information are we going to gather? How are we going to do it? I see people create new Excel sheets for capturing the same data. And you go like, yeah, but we just did this a month ago or 2 months ago. And you go like, there must be a way in which we can start capturing these best practices and we can actually not just identify the lessons that we need to learn, but actually learn from them.
Gisli, who are your heroes and why?
My heroes when it comes to this particular work are actually the local people. Because when I go out and I see what's being done, it's not us in the international community who are coming in. We usually come in, from our comfortable lives, and we come in and we rough it out for 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a difficult space, and we try to do our best. But it's actually the people who were there during the disaster, who stepped up and started rescuing people, started doing things because they felt like they needed to. And then they're the ones who continue to do that work. So I very often meet people in this line of work, the locals, and I've seen people who do not have titles. They're not the country managers or country directors or operation managers, but maybe some of the lowest level within the organizations they're working within, whether that is in the Red Cross or national staff for the UN. But they're the people who rise up and actually make things happen during a disaster. I remember especially when I was in Indonesia 3 months ago for the earthquake there, seeing this woman who, small, petite woman who was working for a UN agency. She didn't have a high title, but she was the one making everything happen. And those are the leaders. It's not the ones with titles, it's the ones that make things happen. So what I think we need to see more of are those kind of people, those kind of leaders that step up and do the real work.
Great. Gisli, I want to thank you for coming on the Leadership Corner, and I want to thank you for inspiring the next generation of leaders.
Thank you.
Thanks.